everyone, and thanks for joining us for the ANA eLearning Academy. We have this special presentation for the Sundman Lecture Series. For those that don't know, Sundman Lecture Series and World's Fair, and the Money Talks, lost my train of thought there. We're supposed to be at the World's Fair of Money in Pittsburgh last week, but of course with COVID, that was canceled, so we moved everything to e-learning. So we appreciate everybody that has come together for this and worked so well to put this together for us. Today we have Prue Fitz talking about politics and power positioning, Byzantine Empress on Coinage. So she's going to get started here in a second. I do want to let you know if you have any questions that do come through, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature here in Zoom. Your questions will come to me and then I will send them to Prue at the end of the presentation. And then after the presentation, I will send out a survey to everybody here in Zoom. So please fill that out and let us know what you thought. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Prue now, and please enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brianna, and everybody else for this opportunity. I don't often get a chance to talk about my favorite subject, and I had time to do some more research this summer, and it was a gift, so I thank you very much. The capital, missing a slide here, but the capital of the Roman Empire was already a movable feast, even before Constantine established and named the city after himself. The city was built on a site previously housing a Greek settlement named Byzant, and in the 17th century, a French scholar coined the phrase Byzantine. But if you had asked a passerby at the time if he was a Byzantine, he would look at you blankly and tell you he was a Roman. This is the Roman Empire at its greatest at the time of Justinian II, and you can see how enormous it was, all the way up to Britain in the north, North Africa, Spain, all this territory, Asia. It was enormous. Its highlight. And this is what the site of Constantinople looked like. And you can see the perfection of the site he chose. Water and high rocks on three sides and only one unprotected side, across which were built two huge walls. So the place is practically impregnable, at least for 1,000 years. But we're talking about Byzantine women and how they got to be empresses. And this is one of several ways they did it. Usually a combination of several, and you can read the list yourself. The only one that the women aren't involved in is the army. But you could marry, you could be the daughter of, you could be the mistress of. Murder comes into many of these stories. Our first lady is called Ariadne, and she may or may not be the subject of this ivory. There's real discussion about who it is. She was the daughter of Roman Emperor Leo I from 457 to 474, and she married a man named Zeno, and he became emperor when her father died. It was her legitimate line that made him emperor. They had a son, Leo II, and proclaimed him Caesar, but unfortunately he died young. Zeno died in 491, and in a surprising move, the council asked her to choose her next husband. She chose a minor official, Anastasius, to succeed her. This is a rare gold tremesis. She is not the first woman on coinage, but there are only very few in the West. The Western Roman coinage included goddesses and gods and particular events, and the Byzantines do not do that. She called herself Alia, which will become the term Augusta for empress, and later on Basileis as it goes into the Greek. About the 7th century, the Greek language and then the Latin language came together with really butt heads, and you get a combination of words and lettering, which makes reading the coins quite challenging and fun. This is the wedding medallion of Anastasius and Ariadne. You can see this is the emperor on the obverse, and on the reverse is Christ, the emperor, and the empress. And this positioning holds true pretty much throughout. We pick the date of 491 when Ariadne married Anastasia because the numismatics realized that he made a major change in the bronze coinage. Up to this point, there was gold and silver, a little bit of silver, and this tiny little bronze numi, which is about the size of your little fingernail, or even smaller than that. So you can imagine if you wanted to do a transaction that was not in silver or gold, it was quite cumbersome. So Anastasius redid the system. And where's my slide? Here we go. And you can see going from left to right, E for pentanumium, I for decanumium, K for half phallus, and the M is the phallus. And the system was based on the phallus. You had 40 numi of the little guys to make one phallus. 5 numi here, 10, and 20. So it was much easier to deal with than a simple tiny numus. The first couple we're going to talk about, Justin and Sophia. They had a double claim to the throne, and we will get to their famous relations, Justinian the Great and Theodora, but not right now. Sophia was niece to Theodora, and Justin was nephew to Justinian. The emperor is the only one, incidentally, who can issue coins. Nobody else has the right to do that. So Justin did this one. We have no information on mints and mintage because Diocletian destroyed all the records earlier. We can surmise that there was quite a feat for women appearing on coinage, as her chief responsibility was running the women's quarters. But that was no challenge for Sophia. This is a phallus, pretty nice one actually. And you have Justin in the honored position with Sophia next to him, looking a little bit larger, a little bit more powerful than he, which is the way it was actually. The reverse side, the M is the phallus to show us the phallus. This is the mint, Cyzicus here. It says Anno on the left. And this is a squiggle, and I think it's supposed to be a 4. So we get quite a lot of information from one coin. And the legend is up above. Look, come back. Dominis Noster, that's left over from the Latin. No, I can't get up there. Here we go. In perpetuity, Justinus. Justinus meaning Justin. Sorry. Here we go. Sophia shows herself to be a powerful and influential empress. She attributed her husband's later madness to his failure to appreciate her status sufficiently. She had unparalleled influence over both the government and the succession. She orchestrated Justin's succession, eliminating his second cousin, also called Justin. Initially, the cousin was invited to Constantinople and then sent to Alexandria, where he was murdered. One source says they sent for his head and then he kicked it around like a soccer ball. We don't know that's for sure. She was depicted from the first year of Justin's reign. The reason for this, we think, is because these coins were used in everyday transaction, which was great propaganda. If she put herself on gold or silver, she would not be seen all the time. We think she did this on purpose. By 572, Justin was showing signs of dementia when the news of loss of Syria, and he became violent. She was forced to put bars on the windows of his rooms after he attempted to throw himself out, and he was totally unable to continue as emperor. She was able to negotiate first 1 year and then a 3-year truce with Persia. But under the circumstances, it was natural she would be consulted by the Senate and asked to give her views on possible successors to Justin. Justin was persuaded to adopt a man named Tiberius, a holdover of the ex-cubators, which is the core of the imperial guards. Sophia was hoping to marry Tiberius herself and remain empress. However, his wife arrived, So she simply ignored her and prevented her from coming into the palace. Tiberius ensured the succession by marrying his daughter to Maurice. Thus, at one point, there were 3 empresses in this small area: Sophia, Anastasia, and Constantina. Sophia even offered to marry Maurice, but he turned her down as well. This happy little interim was interrupted by a general named Phocas, acclaimed by the army after he usurped the throne. The army is one of the 3 ways that you can get a man in this case, to be emperor. There's the army, there's the Senate, and there's the populace, and they all seem to have equal power. Okay. Here we go. To the rescue was the general named Heraclius. He came in and made short work of Phocas, who turned to him and said, "Will you do any better than I?" This is a half phallus. In the middle is Heraclius, who is the emperor, and Heraclius Constantine, who is beardless and on the right, and Martina is on the left. You can see it pretty, you can sort of see her crown here. She is in the privileged position because he is underage and he is not their son, but he is the son of Heraclius's first marriage. Martina was relentless in pushing the children she had with the emperor forward so that her line would be carried on. They had 10 children, and those that survived had handicaps. This was thought to be retribution by the church because she was his niece, and there was a prohibition against marrying such a close relationship. The empress wears a crown adorned with pyramids and long pendilia, and her position on the left of the coin shows that she's taking rank after the heir. She was not popular. There is at least one coin where her image was defaced. In addition to the incest charge, people were scandalized that she accompanied her husband on many of his journeys, even giving birth on one. In this particular coin, Heraclius is on the left, his son is on the right, until the difference in their size, and Martina is on the reverse, holding a staff. She's the first woman to appear on silver. Here again is Heraclius, the emperor, on the obverse, and Heraclius Constantine on the left, and Martina on the right, on the reverse. Heraclius was Martina's 4th child born on campaign, and he was the one she promoted to succeed Heraclius. The emperor had to be perfect, and her 3 older children were deformed. In 637, there was a plot to supplant Heraclius, and she may have been involved. The consequence was clear, the succession had to be laid out. Martina's son, Heraclius, was crowned emperor, actually co-emperors with Heraclius Constantine, the oldest son. To further complicate things, her next son David was made Caesar, and 2 of his sisters were pronounced Augusti. At this point, Heraclius Constantine, the eldest son, was suffering from ill health. He had a son who was only 7. The political situation was tense, and Martina's children clearly were in a position to make a move on the throne. In spite of her efforts, her husband did not overlook his first son, but left the throne to both sons, Heraclius Constantine and Heraclius, a situation asking for trouble. Constantine was 28 and Heraclius was 15. Martina clearly expected to have some authority in government, a ruler in her right and not just a figure. After the gruesome death of Heraclius, punishment for his incestuous relationship, the church felt, in an unheard of show of authority, Martina summoned the patriarch, the senate, and other dignitaries to the hippodrome to show them his will and the provision for herself and Heraclius' sons. The populace demanded that the co-emperors be brought out. She proceeded to demand as empress first place in the empire to assume authority herself. The crowd, in contrast, made their wishes for Heraclius Constantine, senior emperor, very plain. They defied her in favor of the emperors, and she retreated to her palace. Heraclius Constantine, the oldest son, now deathly ill, retrieved a private sum of money, more than 2 million solidi, to distribute to the soldiers to persuade them to secure the succession for his son after his death. He died, Heraclius Constantine, the son, died after approximately 100 days. And of course, the belief was that Martina had poisoned him. Heraclius, her oldest son that was not deformed, succeeded to the throne, though the de facto ruler, of course, was Martina as regent. The church opposed this, saying, "It is not fitting the one derived from a reprobate seed should sit on the imperial throne." She held the capital securely for about a month, and then the youngest, Heraclius Constantine's son, also Heraclius Constantine, but he's now known as Constans, thank goodness, was 10 years old and was crowned in St. Sophia. Shortly afterwards, the people of the capital and the Senate, as well as the army, all three arms, revolted against Heraclius and Martina. The three sons were stripped of the imperial crown with their noses cut off and sent into exile. Martina's tongue was cut out and she was ultimately killed. So now we're 60 years past this, approximately in 717, and you can see what's happened to the empire. When Justinian had all that land around the Mediterranean, it was known as a Roman pond, but he overstretched his budget and it never recovered. The budget never recovered. So you can see how it has shrunk now. Okay. Now we get to the elephant in the room. We have to spend a little time talking about iconoclasm because it was a very important issue at the time. If you were an iconoclast, you did not believe in the power of the images. If you were a iconodual, you did believe in the issue. Is the image, the icon itself being worshipped, or is it simply a passageway to God? This was the sticking point. And it seems kind of senseless to us today, but it was very important to them. They had to get it right, their passage to God. It was very important. There's still icons all over the world, particularly Greece, which was a major part of the Byzantine Empire. When I was in Greece, probably 35 years ago, I found an icon sitting by itself out in a field with no village around, no road, no nothing. And I wondered a lot about why it was there and what it stood for. The next bit, we have to go through 4 generations of men before we get to the good stuff. So bear with me. The Byzantines had been going through a bad patch internationally in 717. There were conflicts to the Arabs, which the Byzantines lost. There was an explosion as well. Greeks are very superstitious. Thus, Emperor Leo, whose background was in Arab countries where images are forbidden, interpreted that God was not happy with the Byzantine use of image, and he banned the use of religious icons. He took them from all over, including the Christ on the Chalky Gate, which is the major gate for coming to Constantinople. The Pope became involved in the dispute involving the icons, and eventually the Pope, who's in Rome, and the Patriarch, who's in Constantinople, excommunicated each other. Christianity officially split between the Roman Catholic Church in the West and the Orthodox Church in the East. The picture that I showed you is an icon being painted out. That's whitewash. It doesn't look like it. Looks like he's dipping it in there, but he really isn't. He has a brush at the end here. He's dipping the brush in the whitewash and whitewashing the image out. So enter Leo III. He is on the verse of the coin, the one on the left, and you can read Dominis Noster, or it's a corruption of the Dominis Noster. Leon, many years, life of many years. And on the right is his son, Constantine V, and he has a similar legend. That's no problem. Wonderful, just as it should be. This coin is Constantine V when he becomes emperor, and he puts his dead father, Leo III, on the reverse. Again, that's happened. It's not common, but it has happened. This time, Constantine V is with Leo IV, and the dead ancestor, Leo III, is still on the reverse. So it's Leo IV that is the heir, and Constantine V, who is the current emperor. Emperor, heir, deceased emperor. At this point, Leo IV was of marriageable age, and Irene was the winner of a bride show. A bride show was a phenomenon, sort of a prequel to the Miss America show, where various ladies would be brought in from all over the empire. And one would be chosen to be the bride of the incoming emperor. Usually the heir to the throne had nothing to say about it. And in this case, we know that he had nothing to say about it. She came from Athens, which was no longer a political power it had been, and we don't know very much about her family. But it is said that she was so beautiful that her background was not very important. She married Leo IV while she was still a teenager, and their only child, Constantine VI, was born in 770. She was a devout believer in icons, therefore an iconodual. And when her husband, who was an iconoclast, caught her venerating icons in her rooms, he declined to have anything more to do with her, which is a possible explanation of why Constantine was an only child in a time when a spare for the throne was considered almost essential. So this is a coin of Leo IV, Irene's husband, and their son, Constantine VI, who is going to be the heir. And on the reverse, now the dead side, his father, grandfather, and father, Leo and Constantine V. Let's go back here. You can see it's getting a little crowded on the coin. Irene's husband, Leo IV, died suddenly from a fever produced by carbuncles raised from wearing a too tight and heavy crown. At 10, Constantine was too young to rule alone, so his mother, Irene, was appointed regent. And this is one of their first coins. As regent, she's on the obverse, that's okay, and he's on the reverse, aka the dead side, but properly calling him B.A.S., which is short for Basileus, king to be, and that's as it should be. She even issued a coin that follows the pattern. She has Constantine VI, not yet emperor, regent, Irene, and here we go again with the dead ancestors, Leo, Constantine, and Leo. And she came out with a bronze phallus, which doesn't have the mark anymore. She's on the obverse, and guess what? He's on the dead side, and he's not dead yet. She came out with this coin. Again, he's on the left, she's on the right, she's badly worn, and you can see the three dead ancestors on the reverse. Irene ruled in his stead long after Constantine was old enough to become emperor. He has been noted as feckless and weak. Whether or not this is true, she kept him on a short leash. He remained, His choice of bride, who was the daughter of Charlemagne, was negated by her, and she forced him to marry someone else whom he detested. In an unprecedented move, he divorced his wife, mother of his daughters, and married this woman, Theodote, who was one of his mother's ladies-in-waiting. This wife, formerly his mistress, was even crowned as Augusta. Their son, another Leo, was born prematurely and did not survive a year. Constantine rushed to her side, which gave his mother the chance to hatch a terrible plot. Irene captured him and caused him to be blinded. Since the emperor must be perfect, he was no longer eligible to rule. Theodote fled the city, and some reports say he died soon after. With the death of her son, she became the first female ruler of the Roman Empire. The West, however, did not recognize the right of a woman to rule and therefore considered the throne to be vacant. Her first act was to have her 5 brothers-in-law mutilated to remove them from plans regarding the succession. She announced her sole rule to both the Arabs and the Franks were delighted with her pronouncement. There was discussion about a possible marriage between Irene and Charlemagne, who was newly crowned Holy Roman Emperor. Since Irene had no heirs anymore, he would be in a position to take over upon her death. Records differ as to who promoted the union and who decided not to go through with it. However, one of the main divisions in the church was that Charles had been crowned Imperatum Romanorum, King of the Romans, when traditionally it was the East that appointed their colleagues in the West. In a time when women were considered to be inferior, their cloudy brains governed by flattery, thanks to Eve in the Garden of Eden, Irene assumed full responsibility for her actions. She praised God for having elevated her to a position where she could do some good. With her son, she had convened the Council of 786 to bring serious dialogue concerning the restoration of icons. It took 2 tries to be successful, but it was. They defined veneration to be appropriate, though the true full restoration of icons would not happen for another 60 years. She restored churches, monasteries, and built new palaces in an area which would be the base for their silk weaving, which is an imperial monopoly, and its production methods were secret. She provided funds for the poor for burial and for those visitors whose misfortune it was to die in the capital. Finally, rid of those pesky in-laws, she solved the coin problem by putting herself on the orbs. Now she had an issue. Constantine is the most immediate emperor. She could put him on the reverse because that's the dead side, but she had murdered him. So she put herself on the reverse. Constantinople and Syracuse are the only 2 mints this time, and she only issued 2 types of coins. She was Basilissa on her coins, the correct form of king, but she signed legal documents as autocrator. Her gold solidi coming from Constantinople, which this one is, or Syracuse, which this gorgeous one is. There must have been a hoard found from Syracuse because I didn't see one of these until 4 years ago, and now you see them fairly often. For that, I never expected to see one at all. I think they're lovely. She reduced taxes, which may have been a bid to get public approval rather than a real concern for the city's economy. When she was banished in 802, she went to the monastery of the Virgin on the Sea of Marmara. Legend has it she died wearing her red shoes, the insignia of a ruler. She issued the gold, which you've seen, and she also issued 1 type of phallus from Constantinople and 1 type from Syracuse. I have never seen one, and I don't know anyone who's ever seen one. That would be a real gift if they came on the market. We have another story with the intertwining of 2 women becoming empresses. These 2 through the legitimate line of their father, Constantine VII, 1025 to 1028. Constantine VII only had daughters. He had 3 daughters. The eldest had had smallpox and therefore was not perfect. So she was in a monastery and not a candidate. On his deathbed, he decided for the succession that he would, Zoe, who was daughter number 2, would marry the prefect of the city and he would become emperor. Romanos became Romanus III, was about 10 years older than Zoe, but the real obstacle to the marriage was he was already married and he was in love with his wife. So he was given an offer he couldn't refuse: divorce versus blinding. So guess what? He he picked divorce. And at the outset, all went well. She loved spending, and there was limitless money at her disposal. A dynasty was always the goal. The couple consulted medical experts, and Zoe even took special medicine and unguents and magic amulets and other practices. However, she was over 50. When it became clear no children were going to eventuate, the situation changed. The honeymoon was over. He took a mistress, but worse than that, he barred her access to the treasury and forced her to live on a fixed allowance. At this time, we need to talk a little bit about the role of the eunuch intertwined with Byzantine royalty, because they were a very important part of the Byzantine scene. Because there were eunuchs, they could not be emperor because they were no longer perfect, but they held a great deal of power. John was a high-ranking official at this time and saw the opportunity to advance his family. He had a younger brother, Michael, who was very handsome, and John, knowing Zoe's predilections, paraded him in front of the empress. And she was instantly struck by his good looks. She wasted no time inviting him to visit her, and she made clear her intentions. The young man was schooled by his brother John in the art of pleasing the empress, and nature took its course. She fell wildly in love with him, and the couple were discovered together in a number of compromising situations, even sitting on the throne, embracing and holding the scepter. Romanus was warned of the danger, but to no avail. The affair was open discussion at the court and in the capital. And on Good Friday of 1034, Romanus drowned while swimming in the bath. Zoe came in and took one last look at him while he was gasping his last and disappeared to marry Michael. Power returned to Zoe as soon as Romanus was dead. She took control, believing she had a divine right to the throne, and her primary desire was to make Michael emperor instantly. She entirely ignored the advice of all her officials and family retainers. The patriarch, summoned by the new emperor, was surprised on his arrival to find Michael dressed in cloth of gold, sitting on a throne beside Zoe, awaiting him. The payment of 100 pounds of gold, 50 pounds to the patriarch personally, and 50 pounds to the clergy, removed any scruples he might have felt marrying the couple, as widows were legally obliged to observe a year's mourning. The whole city joined in rejoicing at Michael's accession. Romanus was forgotten, and the populace widely and lightheartedly acclaimed Michael as emperor the day after Romanos' death. Michael became Michael IV, and they settled down as a new imperial pair, and things seemed to be happy initially. Not for long, however, and it may have been that Michael was feeling guilt at his predecessor's murder, which in turn intensified his epilepsy. On the pretext of a plot by Zoe, he had her confined to the women's quarters. She was, however, persuaded to adopt Michael's nephew, also named Michael, as heir to the throne because the epilepsy was getting worse. This suggestion was suggested by John, let's keep it in the family, the eunuch, who now had the government of the empire in his own hands and feared his brother's death might leave his family out in the cold. The new Michael succeeded seamlessly, but there was a 3-day period when Zoe was empress and controlled solely. This is the only coin. There are 2 bronze patterns from the time. This is one of them. I've never seen them. I'm assuming they're done by an oaks. But with only 3 days, there was not enough time to issue coinage. But there she is with all the trappings. Oopsie. Way too. Okay. So I need to go back here. She had given her consent to Michael's nephew because she had been assured he would be emperor in name only, and she would retain the power. She agreed, and he was crowned 3 days after Michael IV died. Michael V began to feel hatred for Zoe and could not bear to hear her name mentioned in public proclamations before his own. And within 5 months, he had sent her to a monastery, charging she was plotting to get rid of him and attempting to poison him. However, the populace, remember they're the third arm of power to get somebody to the throne, became anxious about Zoe's banishment. It was the topic of intense debate by the elite, the palace staff, the clergy, businessmen, and especially the imperial guard, who felt her safety was their responsibility. The populace erupted in defense of the empress. "We want our ancestors and heir and Mother Zoe," they yelled, and broke into violent rioting. There was a rush to the monastery to release Theodora, who was the younger sister, who at first refused to cooperate. She was quite happy where she was. But they dragged her from the sanctuary, magnificently made her sit on a horse, and with due honor led her to St. Sophia. At some point after midnight on the 20th of April, everyone claimed her empress together with Zoe. For the third time, Zoe had the empire returned to her, this time with her sister. They were two opposites. Zoe was short and round and blonde with an aquiline nose, and her body was radiant with whiteness of skin. They said she never showed any signs of age. Theodora was tall and spare and very careful with money. She was cheerful and smiling and eager for any opportunity. Largesse was poured out more than ever, but we hear from contemporary sources that neither of them was fit to govern. They confused the women's quarters with important matters of state. There was a transformation of the women's quarters into the emperor's council chamber. This is a coin they issued together. I can't make it any bigger, but it's absolutely gorgeous. Zoe is on the left and Theodora is on the right in full regalia. They're pendilia, which are like earrings, but they're not attached to the ear, but they fall down like earrings along the side of the head, and their crowns and their jewels. Looking pretty good, and with the Virgin. This is another view. I've never seen one of these either. I did see one was up for auction maybe 10 years ago with a starting bid of $70,000. The sisters detested each other, so the joint ruling did not work and only lasted, I think, 7 weeks. Theodora returned to the nunnery where she was very happy, and the Senate looked for another husband for Zoe. They found one in Constantine, another Constantine. He was quite happy to come, but he wanted to bring his mistress with him. Apparently, at this point, Zoe was too old to be resentful, so she welcomed the mistress. They had an interesting ménage à trois with adjoining bedrooms. Zoe does not appear on coinage with any husband, in spite of being the legitimate claimant. There is a crown that shows both Zoe and Theodora with him, and it has enameled medallions on the side. It's really quite stunning. I could get on the web and I could get a picture of the crown, but I could not copy it. They're copywritten. If you want to see it, you type in Zoe, Theodora, and Constantine, and it will come up, and it's really quite stunning. It's worth the trip. Okay. Zoe died before Constantine, and upon Constantine's death, the populace again demanded the true heir, and Theodora ruled alone, wisely and well, but died in her late 80s. Everyone assumed she would marry, but she declined. She had no desire to establish somebody else on the throne. The empire was hers alone, and she proceeded to use authority in all matters of government quite openly. She appointed her officials, she dispensed justice, and she exercised her rights in the court of law, issuing decrees sometimes in writing and sometimes verbally. She assumed her natural and rightful heritage. The seasons of the year went well, the harvest was abundant, and she produced 2 types in gold, the Sustaining numisma and the Tartarin numisma, which is much smaller. Numisma is the Greek word for solidus, so it's the equivalent of the solidus. Another picture here. This must be a stunning coin. Again, you can see all the important parts. Pendilia here, crown with 5 little cat ears up here. She's holding a globus cruciger, which is a ball that looks like the earth. It did not exist, but you see it on a lot of the coins. She attained her rule through inheritance. As the last member of the Macedonian family, the line passed when she died. It may be that the sisters' main contribution to their country was preparation for the inclusion of female saints who represented the virtues of being female with differing contributions. This is not the crown I'm talking about, but it will show you the enamel and pearl. Pearls were very valuable to the Byzantines. And this is a lead seal, which I own, and that is Theodora. It's gorgeous. Okay, well, we all know what happened in 1261. The Crusades were on their way south, but they stopped in Constantinople and virtually razed it. The Latins took over for this period of time. This is not wrong dates up there. 1204 to 1261. The coinage is pretty wretched. There aren't any women on it. There were empresses, but they are not pictured on the coinage. Foreign-born empresses were not common. Byzantine princesses were used as currency on a regular basis. Princesses forged important political links between countries. The legal age for marriage was 12 for girls, but contracts were frequently made for the very young. As a child, a princess would learn to live with a future mother-in-law in Constantinople, learn Greek, the complicated rituals of the Orthodox Church. Usually her name was changed to one more appropriate to the new family. Anna of Savoy, and she is always called this, is one of those princesses. She was the daughter of Count Amadeus V of Savoy in a region in southeastern France bordering on Italy. She was the second wife of Andronicus III and married in 1326 when she was only 6. About the age of 16, she became Empress of Byzantium and changed her name from Joanna to Anna. She bore 5 children. Andronicus died in 1341, and she became regent to 9-year-old John. Her coinage divides into 4 periods very nicely. The first as Empress with Andronicus. And you can see what the coinage has gotten to in terms of fineness of artwork. It's pretty awful. You have Andronicus kneeling before Christ, and on the reverse, Anna kneeling, and John V standing. John V is their oldest son, so he is the heir. And another one, this is a silver basilicon. Andronicus kneeling before Christ, and Anna and John V standing. And you can see, if you look hard, you can see there are differences in what they're wearing. You can clearly see this is Anna and John. Christ with the nimbus here. This would be the regency with Christ enthroned and John on the left and Anna standing. One source posits that the gold that we just saw was now about 3.9 grams, close to the standard 4.5 established by Constantine back in the 4th century. The second period, which this represents, was while she was regent for John V. John was only 9 when his father died and too young to rule alone. These were dark days for the empire, as she, as regent, and Andronicus's right-hand man, John Cantacusenos, believed he was regent as well. So there was a 6-year-old struggle for the regency. She struggled to keep herself and her son in power, appealing to Pope Clement VI for aid against her enemies. The Civil War bankrupted the kingdom, and her attempt to raise funds by pawning the imperial jewels to Venice only resulted in their permanent loss, and they were not redeemed. Her popularity plummeted as John Cantacusenos rose. She finally surrendered the throne in 1347. Ultimately, John Cantacusenos ruled with John V as John VI. And here she is appearing with him in the silver. This is later. The third period was her joint regency with John V in Thessaloniki, when only silver assaria were issued. Bronze assaria were issued. She appears with John in the reverse, and Saint Demetrius, as patron saint of Thessaloniki, appears on the obverse. Eventually, John VI, who was John Cantacusenos, was ousted, and John V returned to the capital in 1351, but the future was grim. He traveled to the court of Louis the Great of Hungary to seek help against the Muslims, but no help was coming. 3 years later, he went to Rome and was converted to the Catholic faith in the hope that they would come to his rescue, which they did not. Anna, as Dowager Empress, became government of Thessalonica, where she ruled wisely until her death in 1365. There are various reverses, the most common of which is a portrayal where she's holding a model of the city. I looked in vain to find one that was good enough to recognize. They're all pretty crummy. When she was the Dowager Empress and the governor of Thessaloniki by herself, she did a very good job. She ruled very wisely. She had learned her lessons, and she was very much loved in that town. Here we have, again, here's St. Demetrius, and we have John and Anna, and this is a wonderful coin. I wish I had this coin. Come back here. The hand of God, Manus Dei, here, reaching down to them, and they're holding a labrum, it looks like. Should be a fabulous coin. So we all know what happened on May 29th, 1453, the fall of Constantinople. The irony is, had Constantine XI, the last emperor, had any money, he could have bought the cannon that the Turks bought. But he didn't have any money, so he sat on the walls and watched as this cannon went through the walls and they took the city. But I don't want to end on a sad note, so I want to go to somebody named Theodora. She does not appear on coins, which is a question that fascinates everybody because she's certainly the best known, one of the best known empresses. There are various busts in marble which may represent her, but we don't know for sure. But we do know for sure, because this has her name on it, do know this is Theodora. She was a courtesan actress who caught the eye of Justinian I, nephew of the reigning Justin I. He was so enraptured with her that he changed the law, which forbade marriage with one of her occupation. They were married by the time he succeeded to the throne, and so she was crowned with him. In spite of her past, which gave early biographies great delight in denigrating her, she proved to be an excellent empress, a true partner. The famous Nike riots in Constantinople in 524 began as a rivalry between two political factions in the Hippodrome and threatened to destroy the city and end Justinian's reign. He was packed and ready to leave the city with chests of gold and jewels when she gave a now famous speech in which she declared that dying was part of everyone's life and that she preferred death in an empress's robe to fleeing. Essentially, she shamed him into staying. It appears his decision to send his troops into the stadium to murder everyone there give estimates as high as 50,000 people dying that day, but the reign was saved. When Justinian almost died in the Great Plague of 541, she ruled in his stead. We do not know her role in the great writings of the time, Justinian's revision of the law, for example, but we do know that she worked tirelessly to change the laws so that families without head of house would be better able to survive, and female children would not have to turn to prostitution to make a living. She even ordered schools for girls be instituted. She died of cancer in 547, 17 years before Justinian, but she certainly left her mark. So there you have it, just a peek in a series of remarkable women long before women's liberation. They were independent, strong, and single-minded. And I appreciate your coming, even though I can't see you. And that's it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Prue, for your knowledge on this topic. We really appreciate everything that you have spoken on today. I loved all the pictures that you had. I'm going to go ahead and send out the survey right now here in Zoom, so please stay on to take that survey.
Okay.
Now, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to send them through the chat or the Q&A feature. We'll hang out for a few minutes as questions come through, and we'll kind of go from there. So again, if anybody has questions, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature.
And you'll have to tell me how to do that.
You won't have to do anything, Prue. I'll read them to you.
Okay.
Yeah. You must have done such a great job presenting that nobody had questions.
Oh my goodness, I put everyone to sleep? Wait,
No.
wait.
All right, let's see what this says. All right, so somebody said, great brief overview in history. Do you think women's depictions of coins on Byzantine Empire sent different messages to those people who used the coins than during the Western Roman coinage empresses?
Yes, I do. Because the Western Roman coinage almost always had goddesses affiliated with the empresses, and that was the emphasis. It was not the empress herself, but her affiliation with whatever god she chose. That was really the focus. So I think the Byzantine ones were more one-on-one propaganda than the Western Roman. That is my personal opinion.
Perfect. Somebody asked if this is going to be posted online. Yes, we are recording this right now, and we are going to post it on our website, money.org. You can find it in the same place that you registered for this class, the e-learning class webpage. We'll post it in that same place under the recorded. Give it a few days, and we should have it up there.
Can I put a plug in for my book?
Yes, please. Please, please, please. I meant to ask for that. Will you do a plug in real quick?
Yes, I wrote a book on Beginner's Guide to Identifying Byzantine Coins, which takes you through how to read the legends, how to read the denomination, a little bit of history, a lot on the mints in terms of who turned out what coinage and when. It's simple, easy to read, and if you have the Seer book, which is the Bible, of course, this is kind of an introduction to how to read his book. His is more comprehensive, but it doesn't start with DN means Dominus Noster, or AVG is Augustus. This is really simple, how to read it. If you have a coin, what does it tell you in terms of legend and etc. And it's at the A&A bookstore.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. So somebody asked, how is the opposite of iconoclast spelled?
Iconodual, ICONDOULE.
There we go. Perfect. Were there many coins with the bust of Helena, Constantine I mother? Do you think she depicted the anonymous coins from 331?
I think she depicted.
Do you think she depicted the anonymous coins from 331?
I don't know what that means, but she was in a lot of coinage with and without him. She was the first really great mother, in my opinion. She went on a crusade to Jerusalem. I think she was in her 60s at the time, collecting relics, pieces of the cross, pieces of the basket that fed the loaves and the fishes. And she was an extraordinary woman. She started out as a barmaid, which is not that uncommon, but the fact that she did so much for the religion is simply amazing. But I don't know the second piece of the question. I don't understand.
Okay, the person that asked that question, would you be able to elaborate, and then we'll come back to it? Somebody asked for the name of your book one more time.
Beginner's Guide to Identifying Byzantine Coins.
Perfect. Let's see here. It has been suggested that Julia Domna and Severina acted as emperors when there was a need. Do you think they deserve to be given credit for that before?
Here's my problem. You're talking Western Roman Empire, which is really before the Byzantine Empire, and I know very little about it. I can recommend David Baggy, who knows a great deal about it, but I'm not as familiar with those empresses. They were pretty strong women.
Somebody asked if you could hold up the text. I'm not sure if they're talking about the text of your book or something else. So the person that asked that question, can you please elaborate on what you mean by hold up the text?
On the book. Not on my desk. But I don't. I don't have a copy.
Well, we are still waiting on a few. Okay, let's see here.
Okay.
They were wondering about the book, so it sounds like we're okay now.
Okay.
Perfect. Anybody else have any other questions for Miss Prue today?
Oh.
Perfect.
And it is spiral bound, which means when you're looking up something, when you're researching, you do not have to put it down with a cup of coffee on one side and a cooler on the other side to keep it flat so that you can look at it and write at the same time.
Perfect.
Published by
there. All right, let's see here. Is there a third sequel coin that was owned by Simon Bendel, who wrote about these anonymous coins, and the coin from plate four from plate 4 has a woman's bust on it? The question is, was this Helena? I'm sorry, I might have to reread that again for you.
Are you talking about the Anonymous Phallus series?
It doesn't say. It says the anonymous coins, and the coin from plate 4, it has a women's bust on it. And was this Helena?
Helena?
Helena, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, we're back in the Western Roman part. I don't know. The Anonymous Phallus series does not have any women on it at all. It doesn't even have any emperors on it, and there's a Christ on it. But I don't think that's what the person is referring to. And if it's Helena, Constantine's mother, I don't know. Sorry.
Let's see here. There was a numis that you showed right before the slide showing all of the different denominations, but it was taken off quickly. Could you show it again?
Maybe. There we go. The 5 was not issued initially. It came later. And there is a 3/4 numis that came later as well, but it was very short-lived.
The numis, they said. N-U-M-M-U-S?
Yep.
All right. All right, let's see. Again, if you haven't finished the survey, please do so. If anybody has any more questions, we have just a few more minutes. Please send them to me and I will get them read aloud. I just put in, oh, they said the slide before this one, Prue.
Oh, the numis?
Perfect.
There's no mark of value, and there are many designs in the numis. But you can imagine taking a sack of these to market to buy a cow. Is not very efficient. And they're so small, they'd slip right through your pocket if you had a pocket.
Awesome. Well, I did just put a link in the chat feature here for all of the previously recorded webinars and e-learnings, as well as a link, the same link that will have all of the future e-learnings that we have coming up. Prue's presentation will be on that link probably in the next few days, so watch for that. And then since it looks like everybody has voted, I appreciate that. We will sign off, and we just want to say thank you again, Prue, for everything that you've done. We're going to send you a certificate of appreciation for all the work that you have done.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It really was.
Good. One question, last question came in. It said, what is on that coin?
Ah. Well, let's see. There's a figure. You can see a head. And then I can't tell you, it's just a meaningless symbol to me on the reverse. They rarely make sense. They're squiggles.
Great.
I can try to find out, but I think I took the image from the web and I'm not sure I kept the information, but I can try to find out. And if I can find out, I'll send it to Brianna and she can send it to you.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so we have a presentation tomorrow by Bill Eckberg. It's going to be the Money Talk series, the same place as where you were here today. If you haven't registered for that, please go to that link I put in the chat. He's going to present on artistry and technology, how the large cent dies were made. So if you're interested in that, please jump onto that one and we'll see you then. Again, thank you, Prue, for everything. We appreciate your time today. And if anybody comes up with any questions after this presentation, you can email me seminars@money.org. I will forward them to Prue to get them answered and get them back to you. Again, thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful Tuesday. Bye.